श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः. Welcome once again in this conversation on Ramayana. And yesterday, as we were discussing about the difficulties that appear in a person's life and how he should surpass those difficult times in his life, and this knowledge helps him so much. We discussed and we were making conversations on this matter yesterday. And moving through those verses, today we are moving towards a verse that is clearly saying something that we would study today. So it says, Varam Varenyam Varadam Tukavyam Santarayati Ashu Chasarvalokam Sankalpitartha Pradam Adikavyam Shutva Ramasya Padam Prayati. So it says, this divine work is worth yielding blessings of God. And when we understand this, that this scripture, this knowledge is worth giving blessings of God, because whenever we hear these words of God, this work of God, see Rama, he resembled all his works to God. His works were completely resembling the works that God does. He lived a peaceful life. He lived a life full of greatness. And so when we hear his life, when we understand the way Sri Rama lived their life and start applying those rules, those meaningful practices in our life, then what happens? Then we achieve bless of God, because whenever we are doing God's work, God's job, then inevitably God's blessings will appear, God's blessing will shower on us. So that's the first line of this verse. It describes that whenever we start listening to the scripture and applying those teachings in our lives, then what happens? We start achieving blessings of God, and we can feel it. We can only feel it, because I told you before, anything, any sort of recipe, how much tasty is that recipe? You can only say it, you can only feel it when you taste it. So this blessing can never be expressed, how it feels like when you are blessed, how it feels like when you take yourself closer to God. It can only be felt. Whatever way we express it, that's all just a part of the feeling, of the peace that we feel in ourselves when we have brought ourselves nearer and closer to God. It can only be felt. That's why it is said the blessing, we achieve divine blessings of God, and blessings could only be felt. Blessings can never be expressed, that this much, there is no this much in blessings. You cannot measure it. The happiness, the peace, the comfort that you gain when you are under blessing of someone, you can't say it, you can't express it. A child is under the care of his mother. He cannot say how much comfort, how much happy he feels when he is with his mother. That feeling that he gets, that he achieves when his mother love showers on him, that is greatest feeling that he could ever achieve. And that feeling is inexpressible. That feeling is incomprehensible, is inexplicable. You cannot express it. And that rules over all those feelings. You give a child anything when he's crying, he would not take anything, but when his mother comes to him, when his mother appears in front of him, all of his pain, all of his sufferings, all of his sorrow, all of his crying, weeping just vanishes away. So this is the work, this is the utility This is the greatness of feeling, which appears as a kind of, by the medium of bliss, in a form of bliss. So here, this scripture is tilting us towards that truth that whenever we are in connection to this scripture, in connection to this knowledge, whenever we align ourselves to, whenever we align our life to the knowledge spoken in this scripture, what happens? We unknowingly, we align ourselves to God. And whenever our life is parallel to God, we cannot find any disturbance in our lives. Our life runs swiftly when it's parallel to God, when it never derails from God, when it never disorients from the path of God. So this scripture, this knowledge, always tune us to God. So this is the importance of the scriptures, that whenever we are aligned to the scriptures, that means we are in a parallel condition to God. So never evade these scriptures, never evade this knowledge, always remain in connection to this knowledge. That's what Sage Valmiki is saying us. Because otherwise you cannot be in connection to the scriptures if you have no devotion, if no dedication towards it. Sage Valmiki is a sage. He is an uplifted person. He could say many things about life. What is the purpose of life? What is the real state of life? What is the truth of life? What is the science of life? What is the purpose of life? He could narrate all those things, but he is focusing our thought. He tries to tether our thoughts towards this thing, that you bind yourselves to this knowledge. This is the first step. Unless you cross the first step, unless you take the first step, you should never even think about taking the last step. All right? Getting an ultimate life, getting the ultimate truth, getting the ultimate purpose of life, that is far away. And that starts from the first step. And the first step is connecting yourselves to the scriptures, to these knowledges, to these informations, divine informations that connect you to that knowledge, to the vast knowledge, to the vast purpose that you are made for. So these scriptures, Sage Valmiki is trying to align us towards these scriptures, and when we align ourselves to the scriptures, there is no way, there is nothing, no obstacle that could ever keep us from gaining the purpose of life, from understanding the purpose of life and ultimately achieving it. So that's why he says, first have your devotion in this knowledge, because without knowledge, without intellect, you cannot understand the path. You cannot visualize the path. And if you're not visualizing the path, how could you walk on that? And if you're not walking on that, how would you be able to get the destination, to get the destiny of your life, to reach at the destination? That's why Sage Valmiki is saying that first have your devotion on this knowledge, because it's a godly work. It's not a spontaneous work. It's not a just usual work. It's a godly work. It's a divine work. First have your devotion in the scriptures, in this knowledge, and day by day, gradually, you'll find yourselves uplifted when you align yourself, when you never disorient yourself, when you never stray away from this knowledge. Then what happens? That you could only feel that, experience that, and that can only be felt or experienced, can never be expressed. All words, all verses, every knowledge falls shorter to define the greatness of God, to define the divinity of God that showers on a person who believes Him, who aligns himself with Him, who lives in a parallel condition to His knowledge, to His works, to His teachings, to His preachings, to His divine to His divinity. It can only be felt, and we people have that power. We people have that strength to do so. That's why this entire knowledge, this entire system is for humans, only for us. You should always think, why is this scripture made for us? Nothing in this world happens without a purpose. And if something so great is created, that means it is possible. Without any possibility, a sage like Sri Valmiki can never happen to write this scripture. There is a possibility in human life. Humans can elevate, can uplift themselves to that state. That's why he is writing that it is possible. And how this possibility appears? When you are in terms and conditions to the scriptures. When you are following the rules and tenets of the scriptures, of this knowledge, of this path. And these books, this divine book show us the way to how you lead yourself in this path. Because you should need a guide for a road that you don't know how it works, how to move on that road. And when you have a guide with you, then your journey becomes swift, becomes easy, becomes peaceful, and never agonizes you. That's how you could lead your path. You could travel on your path easily without getting agonized, without putting yourself in any sorrow. And then what the sage is saying, Santarayati ashucha sarvalokam. It brings you up instantaneously. I mean, this world that we see around us, it uplifts you from all those sort of sorrows or anything, any materialistic feeling that appears in you, that appears in a person. It uplifts that person from all those things. I mean, he never gets affected by whatever condition that appears in his life, in his surroundings. And he always puts himself to help people, help his surroundings, help people who live in the community with him. So this scripture, reading this scripture, understanding this knowledge, what he becomes, he never gets affected by any other person, but his life, his works, his deeds, his good feelings affect other person, influence other person, and that's how the society, this community, this entire system gets elevated. And that's how this scripture is defining the position, the state of the person, what he becomes when he understands this knowledge. And in this next line, what it says, Sankalpitartha pradam adikavyam Shutvacha Ramasya padam prayati. Yes. In the second line, he also says that this scripture, this knowledge, takes you to that truth just right away. I mean, without any delay. It takes you to that truth without any delay. It takes you to that position, to that state where you should be. And how it works just instantaneously. You understand that truth, you understand how your behaviors, your emotions, your entire life should be. And you connect yourself to that state of life. There are many ways, there are many austerities that people perform, that seekers perform to understand the divinity, the divine knowledge. But this scripture is so much fast. Like if you are in a sports car and compare the speed of sports car with a car, and compare the speed of a satellite with some car. So who is faster? So he compares the knowledge of this scripture to the fastest thing, as the fastest thing. It takes you, it leads you to Almighty faster than any other thing. The knowledge is comprehensible. The knowledge is just, it aligns with you. It is so easy to understand this knowledge. The way it has been written down by sage Valmiki, it is worth taking you at a greater speed to that God. It never takes much time to connect you to the truth, and that's what this scripture is saying. It takes you to that truth swiftly, easily, and makes you peaceful just right away. When you study it, right at that time, you feel better, you feel happier, you feel healthier. And then, what it says, Santarayati Ashucha Sarvalokam. If everyone's behavior hearing Ramayana becomes like Ramayana, they won't have to linger for peace. I mean, if every person's behavior, if every person's emotions, when he hears this scripture, when he hears this knowledge, becomes like this knowledge, becomes like the teachings that are written down here. If he starts accumulating all those teachings in his life and just practicing those teachings in his life, utilizing them, what happens? He no longer have to delve for peace. He no longer have to work for peace, because this knowledge is in itself a peace. It gives peace to people, and even more, collective power becomes more powerful. It is said, Sarvalokam, every person becomes the real person. And when the whole community is good, then no one could defy the laws of truth. No one could defy the laws of nature. No one could defy the laws of humanity, of brotherhood, of coexistence. Because there is a great power in collective work, in collective action, in collective behavior. When you are working something collectively, then greater power is generated in that work. So when collective power, when you are doing something collectively, what happens? You are more powerful. And that's how community is made. When 10 people in a community work in a good way, behave in a good way, work in a good way, what happens? The 11th person should also have to do like that. He's forced to do that. First, he does forcibly if he's not willing to do that, and then that forceful doing becomes a practice of his life, becomes a tendency of his life, and he too becomes a good person. So that's how a society, the atmosphere that we live inside of, that affects a person greater than any knowledge, than any preaching, than any speech, than any sort of sermon. So this scripture, hearing this scripture, listening to this scripture, when every person's life is good, when every person's life achieves divinity, when every person is working towards getting a purpose, to achieve the purpose of this life, then other persons, other parts of the community too will follow those people, because there is a great strength in collective work. So that's why any work that we do collectively happens in a well manner. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.